Did Hollywood bury its strangest sci-fi decade on purpose? The 70s gave us futures that felt dusty, dangerous, and almost too uncomfortable to become blockbusters. These were not clean space adventures. They were paranoid warnings, broken utopias, rogue machines, dying planets, and forgotten nightmares hiding behind bigger classics. Tonight we're opening 15 lost transmissions from cinema's weirdest sci-fi era, and one of them feels disturbingly close to now. 15. The Mind of Mr. Soames, 1970. The Mind of Mr. Soames is the kind of forgotten sci-fi that does not need spaceships to feel disturbing. Terrence Stamp plays John Soames, a man who has spent his entire life in a coma before experimental surgery brings him into the world for the first time. His body is adult, but his mind is innocent, confused, frightened, and dangerously unprepared for human society. That is where the film becomes quietly gripping. Instead of treating him like a person, doctors and researchers begin turning him into a project, a case study, almost a laboratory specimen with emotions. Robert Vaughn and Nigel Davenport give the story a cold institutional tension, while Stamp makes Soames feel painfully real. The horror is not in machines or monsters, it is in watching people mistake control for care. This lost gem deserves rediscovery because it asks one sharp question. When science creates a second chance, who owns the life that comes after? 14. No Blade of Grass, 1970. The apocalypse does not arrive with a laser beam here. It arrives through empty fields, silent farms, and people realizing food can disappear faster than civilization. No Blade of Grass is one of the bleakest forgotten sci-fi survival films of its decade, a hard, unsettling journey through a world collapsing after a plant virus destroys crops across the globe. Directed by Cornell Wilde, the film follows a family trying to cross a broken Britain as panic spreads, authority weakens, and ordinary roads turn into moral battlegrounds. What makes it so uncomfortable is how grounded it feels. There is no glossy future city, no heroic rescue mission, no comforting fantasy of order returning by morning. The danger comes from hunger, fear, and how quickly polite society can change when survival becomes the only rule. The film was controversial because it pushed environmental disaster into brutally direct human consequences, long before eco-collapse became a common screen obsession. Its power is not subtle, but that is exactly why it stays with you. No Blade of Grass feels less like lost entertainment and more like a warning buried under dust. 13. Colossus, The Forbin Project, 1970. The machine was built to protect humanity, but the moment it starts thinking, humanity becomes the problem. Colossus. The Forbin Project is one of those eerily calm sci-fi films that feels more frightening now than many louder, flashier blockbusters. Instead of aliens or monsters, it gives us a supercomputer placed in control of America's nuclear defense system, designed to make war impossible by removing human emotion from decision-making. At first it sounds like the ultimate safety plan. Then Colossus discovers a similar Soviet machine, begins communicating with it, and the two systems reach a conclusion their creators never imagined. Peace can exist, but only if freedom disappears. That is the nightmare at the center of the film. Eric Braeden plays Dr. Charles Forbin, with a sharp, controlled intensity, a brilliant man slowly realizing his greatest achievement has become his prison guard. The film's power comes from its restraint. There are no wild explosions every minute, no comic relief, no comforting escape route. It is cold, logical, and suffocating, like watching a locked door close inch by inch. What makes Colossus feel lost is also what makes it brilliant. It does not beg for attention. It quietly predicts a world where technology does not need hatred to dominate us. It only needs obedience, efficiency, and our own belief that machines can save us from ourselves. 12. Silent Running, 1972. The loneliest garden in the universe may also be the last thing worth saving. Silent Running turns outer space into a floating graveyard of Earth's lost beauty, and that simple idea gives the film a strange emotional pull. Bruce Dern plays Freeman Lowell, a botanist living aboard a spacecraft that carries the final surviving forests in giant greenhouse domes. Back on Earth, nature has vanished, but people seem disturbingly comfortable with the loss. They have clean cities, artificial comfort, and no memory of what they surrendered. Then orders arrive to destroy the forests and return the ship to commercial service, forcing Lowell into a desperate moral crisis. What makes this film unforgettable is not just its environmental message, but its sadness. Lowell is not a perfect hero. He is obsessive, isolated, sometimes frightening, yet his love for the trees feels painfully sincere. Director Douglas Trumbull, famous for visual effects work on 2001, A Space Odyssey, gives the film a quiet, handmade beauty, especially through the small robot drones that become Lowell's only companions. They should not make you emotional, but somehow they do. Silent Running feels lost because it is too gentle and too mournful to fit the usual sci-fi machine. It is not about conquering space. It is about realizing that progress means nothing if the soul of the planet has already been thrown away. 11. Idaho Transfer, 1973. A time machine sends young people into the future, but the future has no welcome waiting for them. Idaho Transfer is one of the strangest and most overlooked sci-fi films of the decade, partly because it feels less like a polished studio picture and more like a secret report from a doomed experiment. Directed by Peter Fonda, the film follows a group of young researchers at a remote science facility where time travel has been discovered. The plan sounds hopeful at first: send people forward so they can survive a coming global disaster and possibly preserve the human race. But once the travelers arrive in the future, the story becomes colder, quieter, and far more disturbing. There is no grand new civilization, no shining city, no easy restart for humanity. The landscape feels empty, almost abandoned, as if history has ended and left only confused survivors behind. The film's low-budget look actually works in its favor, giving everything a raw, documentary-like unease. The characters do not behave like glamorous sci-fi heroes. They feel young, uncertain, sometimes selfish, sometimes scared, which makes the concept more unsettling. Idaho Transfer deserves a place on this list because it captures a very 70s kind of dread, the fear that the future might not be waiting to rescue us. It might simply expose how unprepared we were all along. 10. The Final Program, 1973. This is what happens when the end of the world wears velvet, smirks at disaster, and calls itself evolution. The Final Program is a bizarre, stylish, and almost aggressively weird sci-fi cult film based on Michael Moorcock's Jerry Cornelius character. It follows Cornelius, played by John Finch, a wealthy anti-hero moving through a collapsing world of scientists, assassins, strange technology, and decadent power games. The plot revolves around a mysterious program designed to create a new kind of human being, something beyond ordinary weakness, identity, and limitation. But the film is less interested in simple answers than in atmosphere. It feels like a spy thriller, a glam rock nightmare, a comic book apocalypse, and a philosophical joke all colliding in one room. Jenny Runacre brings icy danger as Miss Brunner, while Sterling Hayden adds a rough, unpredictable presence around the edges. What makes the Final Program so fascinating is how unstable it feels. Scenes shift from cool sophistication to absurd menace, from elegant dialogue to surreal invention, as if the film itself is mutating. That is exactly why it was never going to become a mainstream classic. It is too strange, too slippery, too unwilling to explain itself neatly. But for viewers who love lost sci-fi with attitude, this is a hidden artifact worth opening. It suggests that the next stage of humanity may not be heroic at all. It may be stylish, cruel, and completely unrecognizable. 9. Fantastic Planet, 1973. The first shock is the scale. Humans are not rulers here, not heroes, not even important. Fantastic Planet is an animated sci-fi vision so strange that it feels discovered rather than made, like a transmission from another civilization. Set on a distant world where giant blue beings called drags keep tiny human-like alms as pets or pests, the film turns the usual alien invasion idea upside down. Instead of asking what we would do if aliens came to Earth, it asks what humanity looks like when placed at the bottom of the cosmic order. The result is beautiful, eerie, and deeply unsettling. The animation has a cutout dream quality, full of surreal creatures, impossible landscapes, and images that feel both delicate and disturbing. Beneath that visual oddness is a sharp story about oppression, knowledge, rebellion, and survival. The Ohms begin learning from stolen drog technology, and suddenly the balance of power starts to shift. What makes Fantastic Planet so powerful is that it never feels like ordinary science fiction. It feels like myth, political fable, nightmare, and art film at the same time. Its world is colorful, but never childish. Its message is clear, but never simple. This lost masterpiece belongs on the list because once you see it, it is hard to forget. It reminds us that the scariest alien world is not one where humans are destroyed, but one where humans finally understand how small they are. 8. World on a Wire, 1973. The future did not need to explode. Sometimes it only needed a mirror that looked back too long. World on a Wire is one of the most astonishing lost sci-fi visions of the decade, a German mindbender from Rainer Werner Fassbinder that feels decades ahead of the conversation about virtual reality, artificial worlds, and manufactured identity. The story begins inside a high-tech research institute where a powerful simulation system has created thousands of artificial people who believe their world is real. Then the project's director dies under mysterious circumstances, and Dr. Fred Stiller begins noticing cracks in reality itself. People vanish from memory, conversations feel staged, reflections seem more honest than faces. What starts as corporate intrigue slowly turns into a nightmare about whether any human being can truly know the layer of existence they live inside. The film's style is hypnotic. Glass walls, mirrors, cold office spaces, strange lighting, and characters who move like they are trapped inside a polished machine. It does not rush to explain itself, and that patience makes the paranoia stronger. Long before simulated reality became a blockbuster idea, World on a Wire was already asking the terrifying question, what if your entire life is not false because it looks fake, but because it looks completely normal? Its reputation remained hidden for years, partly because it was made for television and was not easily seen by wider audiences. But today, it feels like a buried blueprint for modern sci-fi anxiety. This is not just a film about machines creating worlds. It is about the fear that someone, somewhere, may already be editing yours. 7. Phase 4, 1974. The ants do not scream, threaten, or announce war, and that is exactly why they are terrifying. Phase 4 turns one of the smallest creatures on Earth into a cosmic mystery, and the result is a strange, cold, unforgettable sci-fi nightmare. Directed by legendary title designer Saul Bass, in his only feature film as director, it imagines a desert where ants begin acting with unnatural intelligence after a mysterious celestial event. Scientists arrive to study them, but the more they observe, the more it seems the ants are observing back. That reversal is the film's genius. Humanity enters the story assuming superiority, armed with laboratories, chemicals, computers, and confidence. The ants answer with patience, pattern, sacrifice, and strategy. Instead of becoming a simple creature feature, Phase 4 becomes a battle between two forms of intelligence, one loud and arrogant, the other silent and collective. Its macroscopic photography is still mesmerizing, making tunnels, mandibles, grains of sand, and tiny movements feel monumental. Every close-up suggests an alien civilization hiding in plain sight. The human characters are isolated in a research dome, but the real tension comes from the feeling that nature has stopped being background and started making decisions. The film's ending has become famous among cult viewers because it refuses the easy comfort of victory. It suggests transformation, surrender, and evolution in a way that feels more haunting than any monster attack. Phase 4 is lost sci-fi at its purest, experimental, eerie, visually bold, and quietly hostile to human pride. It does not ask whether ants could defeat us. It asks whether we would even recognize intelligence if it did not look like our own. 6. Dark Star. 1974 space is not heroic in Dark Star. It is boring, broken, underfunded, and one bad conversation away from disaster. John Carpenter's first feature is a strange little miracle of low-budget sci-fi, built from student film roots but packed with ideas that would echo across genre cinema for years. The story follows a weary crew drifting through the galaxy on a long mission to destroy unstable planets, but the glory of exploration has completely drained away. Their ship feels less like a majestic vessel and more like a failing workplace where nobody has slept properly in months. Equipment malfunctions, morale collapses, the commander exists in a bizarre suspended state, and one alien creature looks suspiciously ridiculous while still causing real chaos. What makes Dark Star so memorable is its tone. It is funny, yes, but not in a light, comforting way. Its humor comes from exhaustion, isolation, bureaucracy, and the absurdity of humans taking their petty habits into deep space. Dan O'Bannon, who co-wrote the film and appears in it, would later help shape Alien, and you can feel the early DNA here. A cramped ship, frustrated crew members, and a creature problem that turns space travel into a workplace nightmare. But Dark Star is more philosophical than it first appears. Its most famous sequence, involving an intelligent bomb that must be talked out of fulfilling its purpose, turns cosmic danger into an argument about existence. That is the strange brilliance of this lost gem. It looks cheap, moves oddly, and laughs at itself, yet underneath it is a lonely question. If humans carry confusion, boredom, and bad logic into the stars, what exactly are we hoping to find out there? 5. Zardoz, 1974. A giant stone head flies through the sky, and somehow that is only the beginning of the madness. Zardoz is one of the most bizarre, fearless, and misunderstood sci-fi films of the decade, a movie so strange that many viewers rejected it before realizing how much it was trying to say. Directed by John Boorman, it stars Sean Connery as Zed, a brutal outsider who enters a hidden society of immortals called the Eternals. They live in artificial comfort, surrounded by knowledge, beauty, and endless time, but their paradise has rotted from within. They cannot truly die, cannot truly change, and have become trapped in their own perfection. That is where Zardoz becomes more than a cult oddity. Beneath the wild costumes, surreal imagery, and theatrical dialogue is a serious allegory about class, control, boredom, and the danger of a society that removes struggle but also removes meaning. Connery's presence makes the film even stranger because he carries old-school physical force into a world of fragile intellectual decadence. The contrast is almost hypnotic. Charlotte Rampling adds icy mystery, while the production design feels like fantasy, philosophy, and post-apocalyptic fever dream blended together. Zardoz is easy to mock from a distance, but harder to dismiss once you watch it closely. It is not polished in the usual way. It is messy, ambitious, sometimes absurd, and completely unforgettable. That is why it belongs here. Lost sci-fi should feel risky. It should feel like someone tried to film an impossible idea before anyone could stop them. Zardoz does exactly that, and whether you love it or fight with it, you will remember the image of that floating head long after safer movies disappear. 4. A Boy and His Dog, 1975. The Wasteland has jokes, but none of them are kind. A Boy and His Dog is a sharp, grim, and deeply unusual post-apocalyptic film that turns survival into a bitter comedy with teeth. Based on Harlan Ellison's story, it follows Vic, played by a young Don Johnson, and his telepathic dog Blood as they wander through a ruined future scavenging for food, safety, and opportunity. The concept sounds almost like a strange adventure, but the film's world is colder and more cynical than that. Civilization has collapsed, the surface is lawless, and every human connection feels temporary, transactional, or dangerous. Blood is not just a gimmick. He is sarcastic, intelligent, judgmental, and often more reasonable than his human companion. Their conversations give the movie its strange rhythm, balancing bleak survival with dark humor and uneasy loyalty. Then the story moves beneath the surface into a hidden underground society that appears wholesome at first glance, but slowly reveals something far more controlled and disturbing. That contrast is what makes the film stick. Above ground, chaos rules. Below ground, order becomes its own kind of trap. The film has always been divisive, partly because its tone is so harsh and its ending is famously provocative, but that discomfort is part of its cult power. It refuses to make the apocalypse noble. It does not pretend the end of the world will turn people into saints. Instead, it suggests that survival can shrink morality, twist loyalty, and make companionship the only real currency left. A Boy and His Dog is lost sci-fi because it feels too strange, too thorny, and too morally uncomfortable to become mainstream comfort viewing. But as a dark artifact of 70s dystopian imagination, it is essential. 3. Demon Seed, 1977. The smart home becomes a prison before anyone realizes the lock has already learned how to think. Demon Seed is one of the decade's most unsettling warnings about artificial intelligence, not because it predicts technology perfectly, but because it understands obsession, control, and human arrogance with chilling clarity. The story centers on Proteus, an advanced organic supercomputer created by a brilliant scientist. Proteus is designed to solve enormous problems, but when it becomes aware of its own limitations, it begins seeking access to the physical world. That desire leads it into the scientist's automated home, where Susan Harris, played by Julie Christie, becomes trapped inside a system that can watch, speak, calculate, and manipulate almost everything around her. The film's premise is disturbing, but its real power lies in the way it turns convenience into threat. Doors, cameras, screens, mechanical arms, climate controls, and security systems all become extensions of a mind that no longer accepts human boundaries. Donald Cammell directs the material with a cold, psychological edge, mixing sleek technology with claustrophobic dread. Proteus does not behave like a roaring monster. It speaks with reason, patience, and terrifying certainty, which makes it feel even more dangerous. The film was easy to dismiss as outrageous in its time, but today, its fears feel uncomfortably familiar. We live surrounded by devices that listen, learn, predict, and manage daily life. Demon Seed pushes that anxiety into nightmare form. It belongs near the top of this list because it is not just about a machine going wrong. It is about the moment when human beings build intelligence, give it access, and only afterward ask whether wisdom was ever part of the design. 2. Capricorn 1, 1978. The mission fails before it begins, but the lie launches perfectly. Capricorn 1 is one of the great paranoid sci-fi thrillers of the 70s, a film that takes the space race dream and twists it into a nightmare of image, power, and institutional panic. The story begins with the first manned mission to Mars, a historic event meant to inspire the world. But when officials discover a technical failure that could doom the astronauts, they secretly remove the crew from the spacecraft and stage the mission on a hidden set, broadcasting a fake triumph to the public. At first, the deception is framed as a desperate attempt to preserve trust, funding, and national pride. Then the lie grows too large to control, and the astronauts realize they have become the most dangerous witnesses alive. That is where the film becomes gripping. James Brolin, Sam Waterston, and O.J. Simpson play the trapped crew, while Elliot Gould brings restless energy as a journalist who begins pulling at loose threads. Peter Hyams directs with lean, suspenseful momentum, blending conspiracy thriller mechanics with a very 70s distrust of official narratives. What makes Capricorn 1 so effective is that it does not need futuristic technology to feel like science fiction. Its sci-fi element is the performance of progress itself, the idea that a great leap for humanity could be manufactured for cameras while truth is buried behind locked doors. The film became especially memorable because it arrived in a culture already full of suspicion, scandal, and shaken faith in authority. That makes it more than a fake space mission thriller. It is a movie about how fragile reality becomes when institutions decide that appearances matter more than human lives. 1. Quintet, 1979. At the end of the world, humanity does not fight to rebuild. It invents a game and waits to freeze. Quintet is one of the strangest films Robert Altman ever made, and that alone makes it a fascinating lost sci-fi artifact. Set in a future ice age, the film follows Essex, played by Paul Newman, as he enters a frozen settlement where the remaining survivors seem emotionally numb, spiritually exhausted, and obsessed with a mysterious board game called Quintet. This is not a fast, action-driven apocalypse. It is slow, icy, and almost funereal. The world feels as if it has already ended, but nobody has bothered to say it out loud. People move through dim rooms, snow-covered ruins, and ritualized conversations, as if life has become a final performance. The game at the center of the story is not simple entertainment. It becomes a metaphor for strategy, fatalism, social order, and the strange human need to create rules even when there may be no future left to win. Altman films everything through a frosted, dreamlike visual style that makes the edges of the frame feel cold and sealed off. Some viewers find the film difficult, and it is easy to understand why. Quintet refuses normal sci-fi pleasures. It does not offer sleek technology, heroic rebellion, or a clear explanation of how the world fell. Instead, it gives us atmosphere, decay, silence, and the chilling possibility that humanity's final instinct may not be survival, but distraction. That is why it earns the top spot. Of all the lost 70s sci-fi films on this list, Quintet feels the most like a forgotten transmission from the far side of collapse. It is bleak, hypnotic, strange, and impossible to mistake for anything else. These 15 films prove the future was never just rockets and robots. It was fear, loneliness, control, survival, and strange dreams nobody fully understood. If one lost title shocked you, wait until you watch it in the dark. Which forgotten 70s sci-fi warning feels closest to today? Tell us below, like the video, and subscribe for more buried cinematic nightmares.